right, guys, coming at you with another What's Next. This is on my number one featherweight in the world right now. That's 126 pounds. The undefeated IBF champion, Josh Warrington of the United Kingdom. Warrington last fought in October of last year when he took on some unknown guy and scored a second-round TKO victory. It was just a stay-busy fight, optional defense. He's still in optional mode. The IBF has granted him the right to make another defense of his world title before he has to make a mandatory defense. And he's actually going to be facing Shu Kan of China in a unification bout next. Shu Kan is the WBA champion right now. So that fight's locked in stone. Warrington will go in as the favorite. He's probably going to be fighting in his backyard. So I would predict that he's going to win that fight. Then he is almost for sure going to have to make a mandatory title defense and a rematch against Kid Galahad. I think that's going to happen. Now, he barely beat Galahad in 2019 in a mandatory title fight. He barely beat him by an ugly 12-round split decision. Can he beat him again? Well, that's the big question. So let's talk about that. Let's run him through the top 10. Let's say he wins the fight against Galahad. So that's what we're going to go off of. Let's say he beats Galahad in another rematch. Where does he go after that? Which would probably be middle of next year, maybe second half. So let's call it, because it looks like his next two fights are lined up already. If he decides to hold on to those belts, so anything can happen. But I think he will. I think he'll rematch Galahad because it's a mandatory fight. He wants to hold on to both belts, and because Galahad and him are both matchroom guys, and I think that's why they'll rematch. So let's take a look, run them through the top 10 right now and see what's next after Shu Kan and then Kid Galahad for Josh Warrington. We start with, Warrington's number one. So we start with number 2, reigning WBC champion Gary Russell Jr. Not going to happen. Gary Russell has already said he's going to be moving up to lightweight in his next fight. He's moving out of this division, so by next year, no chance this is going to happen. Number 3 is Kid Galahad. So I think he's going to fight Galahad after Kan in a mandatory defense. Could he fight him a third time? If he beats him a second time, no matter how he beats him, I don't believe he's going to fight him a third time. If he loses to him in the rematch, which is also very possible, I absolutely think a third fight is possible after that. So he definitely could be spending 2021, all of it, against Kid Galahad in back-to-back fights if he were to lose. If he wins, though, no chance at a third fight. He'll already have 2 wins. He won't want to take that risk again. So yeah, that's what I think. No chance at a third one if he wins, but big chance of a third one if he loses. Okay, number 4 is Carl Frampton. It depends on how Frampton does up at 130, going after the WBO title there. Personally, I don't see this rematch happening. Frampton could definitely make the weight, but is he going to want to move up? He's got big fights coming his way at 130. Personally, I think he's going to lose to Jamel Herring in his next fight, and then I think he'll be done. He might just retire after losing to Jamel Herring. So it depends on if he wins at 130. If he loses a close decision and decides that 130 was just too big and he still wants to stay alive and come back down to 126, I guess a showdown with Warrington could happen, a rematch, but I'm leaning towards a no, so I'm going to say no to this one. Number 5 is Shu Kan. Shu Kan is fighting him next. He probably would not get an immediate rematch if Kan loses. If Kan loses a close one, he probably wouldn't get an immediate rematch with Warrington because Galahad has the mandatory shot. So would Kan be fighting Warrington after that? Could he fight after Warrington maybe beats Galahad in a rematch? Definitely. If he's there and he wants it, and the first fight is close, I definitely could see them locking horns again in a rematch. I'm going to lean towards the less likely, because if the first fight's close and he actually gives him a good fight, I don't think he's going to want any part of a rematch next year, because Kan doesn't have a huge name. That's why. But you never know. It could happen. So we'll see. Next at number... what if Kan were to beat Warrington, though? If Kan were to upset Warrington, definitely could see a rematch, and he might give up the IBF title and hold on to the WBA title, or just to go right after Kan in a rematch. So definitely think a rematch could happen between the two. But I'm going to lean towards the less likely, because I do think Warrington's going to beat him. And even if it's close, he wouldn't fight him again. He would move straight forward to his mandatory title defense. So that's what I think. All right, next at number 6 is the undefeated WBO featherweight champion Shakur Stevenson. Well, I don't see this one. They almost got the fight done. Warrington then moved on to Matchroom, and now Shakur Stevenson's moving up in weight to 130. I don't see these two guys locking horns next year around this time, or a little bit later on, because I think Stevenson's going to be up at 130. 135. Next at number 7 is former champion Jesus Rojas. Rojas would have to earn this fight. I think he'd have to come out and maybe win a WBA mandatory to get in line. But I think this is a fight Warrington stays away from unless Rojas somehow becomes a world champion by the middle of next year, which I don't think is going to happen. So I'm going to lean towards the no. Number 8 is Tuxko Nyambayar. I'm going to lean towards the no, but it definitely is possible because Nyambayar might become the next WBC champion. He just fought for the belt. He lost to Gary Russell, but he's right there in line for in one of the top 3 spots. Now, Kid Galahad's number 2. If Galahad passes on a vacant title fight for the WBC title and moves on to face Warrington, the winner of Warrington and Cannes, then Nyambayar moves up to number 2 and would fight Jesse Magdaleno. So I think Tuxko Nyambayar is going to be fighting for the vacant title and has a very good chance of winning it. So if he's champion middle of next year and Warrington's still the unified champ, I definitely could see these two guys coming together and having a showdown. I'll lean towards the less likely because what's his name's with the PBC and Warrington is with Matchroom, but it still could happen. Number 9 is Isaac Dogbe. I mean, if Dogbe worked himself up and were, somewhere in the mix, it's possible, or became a mandatory challenger, I guess it's possible, but leaning towards the less likely unless it's a mandatory fight because Dogbe's with the PBC, Warrington's with Matchroom. Excuse me. And then finally at number 10 is Jesse Magdaleno. Another fight that I think is possible, but I'm going to lean towards the less likely because he's with Matchroom. I mean, he's with Top Rank, Jesse Magdaleno is, and Warrington's with Matchroom. But I wouldn't completely rule it out because Jesse Magdaleno could very easily become a world champion next. Not easily. I mean, it's going to be a tough fight either way, but I think Magdaleno is either going to be in line to face Galahad or Nyambayar for the vacant WBC title because he's number 1 in the WBC. Or when the WBO does their new rankings, I think it's very possible he fights Michael Conlon for the vacant WBO title that Shakur Stevenson's going to be giving up. So by this time next year, if Magdaleno's still the world champion, I would think he's probably going to lean more towards facing somebody with Top Rank, but I wouldn't completely rule it out that he fights Warrington. I wouldn't completely say it's not possible, but I'm going to lean towards the less likely. So that's it on what Warrington could be doing given he beats Shuken in a unification bout, becomes a unified champ, and then were to retain his title in a mandatory defense against Kid Galahad in a rematch. Personally, I think it's very possible he could lose and face Galahad a 3rd time and take up all of his 2021 on Kid Galahad. Other than that, it's kind of wide open. You don't know because featherweight is turning over.
In 2 miles, take exit 355 from Monterey Street.
They're losing 2 of their top fighters and 2 of their champions, and actually 3 of their top fighters. The featherweight division is losing Carl Frampton, a former 2-division champ, and he has a big name. They're losing Gary Russell, the WBC champion. They're losing him, and he's one of the big names. And then they're also losing Shakur Stevenson. So this division a year from now, towards the time when Warrington's going to be making that next fight, if he wins his next 2 fights, it's going to have a new look to it. There's going to be new faces and new opportunities, and we just got to wait and see what happens. But I like Warrington a lot. He brings the fight. He throws a lot of punches, but I really think him and Kid Galahad could turn into a rivalry. And we'll see what goes down. So that's it. That's the what's next on the undefeated IBF featherweight champion of the world and my number 1 featherweight right now, Josh Warrington. Hope you enjoyed it. True Boxing, you've been hit with the truth.